Dixon here. Welcome to episode 72 of Bank to the Future Live. We haven't done an interview for a while, so today we went through our portfolio companies and we decided to line up an interview with one of our older clients, as it were, Sinclair from what used to be Bitmari when we did the original funding round. And we're going to be discussing what the latest is, why the change in name, and what's been happening. So Sinclair, how you doing?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Simon. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, great. So most people are investors in that will be listening to this. They may have invested in the original funding round, which I think we did. Well, it was quite a few years back. Memory serves me right, maybe 2015, 16, maybe a little bit later. So yeah, why don't you give the audience a bit on your background, Sinclair, and how you got involved in Bitcoin and how you went to set up what used to be called Bitmari.
Well, my background is engineering. I'm a mechanical engineer by profession. Been an entrepreneur for about 20 years, working for myself and worked for different companies. The last place I worked was the U.S. Patent Office as a patent examiner. And much of that was based on a need to try to create, build, develop. And one of the things that was important for me is try to solve problems. So this was something that actually led me to Bitcoin, because one of the issues that we always have seen was just dealing around money and being able to move money. My co-founders from Zimbabwe, we had worked on a couple of projects like an ethanol project, as well as a few other projects that were trying to actually move money. And besides trying to actually deal with some real issues on the ground, it kept coming back to not being able to move money. And so when Bitcoin came out, I actually heard about it through Max Kaiser, watching the Kaiser report. And it was talking about this new, gateway to actually transfer value. And this is probably about 2012, 2013. And I never looked at it as a store of value, more of as rails that could move without having an intermediary to stop it. So, at that time, there was like altcoins was a part of the offerings, but no one, or at least at that time, 2012, 13, you weren't talking about the super value of Bitcoin being millions of dollars. That was something like off in the distance, but literally it was being able to transfer value from Washington, DC to Harare, Zimbabwe in seconds. That was like really and as far as making money, we thought by being able to replace a Western Union would be enough to add value. Like literally taking a percentage of that business was enough in order to actually make a great deal of money, and not necessarily the rising value of a token. So as we started doing that and developing that out, we were able to receive a license explicitly to use Bitcoin to remit cash from the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. And that was under Robert Mugabe, may rest in peace, he passed away. But under his government, they actually gave us a license to explicitly use Bitcoin in 2017. And that was a huge thing. That if we know that there's been other companies working in Africa, and oftentimes what happens is people will come up with great ideas and implement them without doing any type of regulatory or engagement. And you can do that at a small scale, but just like in the United States or any other jurisdiction, you get to any kind of scale, there's gatekeepers that will do things to have you pump the brakes. So we learned a lot from other companies that have been in the space who had got shot, like BitPesa, who was a trailblazer in the space. And they had a problem in Kenya where they were using M-Pesa's rails basically to use that to Bitcoin without an explicit agreement or relationship. And we did not want to face some of those same problems. So it took us longer because we had to go through a process of identifying a bank to partner. So we are a partner with the second largest bank, state-owned bank in Zimbabwe, and use that as a solution base to say, look, we're going to give you an opportunity to remit funds that's cheaper for your customers. You make more money because we're able to give you more fees than the Western Union MoneyGram, and we developed that out. And this bank had over 40 locations. We implemented in their bank. We had our own standalone browser where we actually have trained them, implementing it throughout the country. And as we went through the process, we established, we operated without problems up until 2018 and a half. They had an election, and Mugabe was removed through a peaceful coup, and the government that came behind it decided to review our license, and we literally have been in the review process since that time. That made it really clear to us that we need to do a better job with regulatory arbitrage, not depending on one transaction channel in order to build out this incredible technology. So that's when the concept of I Love Black People, where we said we're not going to just focus on one country. We're going to deal with the issues that are facing members of the African diaspora globally. And that's about 1.5 billion people. That's a huge market. So you look at Zim, about 16 million people, which was a good place to start. So oftentimes people come to Africa, they want to start in Nigeria, 200 million. But when you're doing a startup or trying to, get the fundamentals together, you want to be in an environment or that you can actually, identify the pieces and know what moved and how it moves, so you don't end up, being distracted or having difficulties from other outliers. So, but that what we learned in Zimbabwe, we were able to use that as our fintech, foundation, and realize that also we needed a bigger market, and that market would be that 1.5 billion Black people. And what is not necessarily obvious, that we often say Africa, but we've always been a Pan-African platform, and that means that we're dealing with Black people, Africans all over the world. So even the context of remittances, you're actually talking about two parties that are living in two different places, often two different continents. So our concept was that no matter where you are as an African, we want to make sure that we give you tools that you can use to solve the problems that you face. And that collectiveness is the 1.5 billion marketplace that really hasn't been approached that way. We've actually talked about this market in 54 countries, which in reality, the 54 countries weren't carved up by the people who lived there. This is a colonial legacy of 54 countries. India is not one monolithic group of people. It's one country, but literally they speak different languages. Hindi is not everyone's native language. That is a national language. In many ways, Africa has been carved up, but literally they share some of the same issues, and we saw that as an opportunity. And I think, coupled with the change of Billmari, it's a learning lesson we found in the industry. When we named these new tokens ICOs, that probably wasn't the best name unless we wanted the SEC to get involved, because ICO rhymes with IPO, which almost begs the question that somebody's going to say, is that the same thing? We could have came up with a whole entire different word and not even at least brought that level of attention. Once we started moving around with different regulatory regimes, as soon as they hear the word bit or coin or crypto, now you're getting red flags. Even getting bank accounts. People talk about United States. United States sucks as it relates to just being open to, it was actually more easy. It was easier in Zimbabwe in many ways because people really wanted solutions. In the United States, you got banksters that'll say as a public, relations ploy that they're for blockchain, but then, or they call it ledger, all kind of euphemisms. But in reality, you can't even open a bank account. So it kind of begs the question, are you really interested in new technology, or is this something to save face until you can navigate or reposition yourself to try to do something differently? So in dealing with those issues, changing our name to Billmari as a startup is already difficult, but at least gave us an opportunity to engage this community without some of the baggage that would often happen. And then we had people who thought we were a token. Like, how do I get a Bitmari? I said, no, it's not a token. It's a service, and it's here to serve you. It's not a, we're not selling Bitmaris. And Mari means money in Shona, which is a local language in Zimbabwe. So Bitmari, we changed to Billmari, so that's bill money. So if you think about paying bills, making bills, so we still are we're very bullish on the fintech space, using Bitcoin and using blockchain. But we learned probably like so many people in the industry, that the name does matter. Building the best mousetrap is not enough. We have to be able to engage the public in a way that where they are, and be able to take them from where they are to where you want them to go. And doing that requires to be able to communicate in a way that they feel comfortable in. And saying Billmari, even the I Love Black People, we've put the technology in the back and put the mission in the front, and it's easier to attract people that way. When we were focused just on tech, people were so fickle. One day they're into Bitcoin, next thing in Ethereum, next thing you know, they're into some other token. And then when we focused on the money, and we would have referral programs and telling people you could actually make transactions cheaper. When we just focused on that, we got a lot of greedy people, and they were trying to game the system, trying to figure out ways to get referral points without doing it. But when we made it a mission to protect Black people from racism and xenophobia, when we made the issue something bigger than money, bigger than technology, but something like the well-being of people collectively, and we start linking that to 500 years of colonialism, the type of people as early adopters that we've attracted, they've been more resilient, more patient with us as a startup, and more committed.
Thank you very much for giving us that background. I'd like to rewind slightly to Zimbabwe. So that was the original market. And I remember we did the funding round right about after you got that, the deal, the permissions from the Zimbabwe. Was it the Central Bank of Zimbabwe, or what do you call it in Zimbabwe?
The RBZ, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe.
Okay, the RBZ. Help us, for those that aren't too familiar with the economic and currency situation in Zimbabwe, from your experience, help us understand like the impact of, not having a currency that you can rely on in a country. I think it's fascinating for people to understand that from someone that's actually, had direct customers and contact with people in Zimbabwe, particularly in something like Bitcoin. Tell us some of the challenges that have happened over those years.
Well, one of the biggest things is data. Data is very expensive in Africa. It's one of the ways that it becomes very difficult to do anything. We would have people upload our app, determine their balance, see what was on their wallet, and then delete the app. So as a part of our product, including with I Love Black People, we always have our wallet products, a non-custodial wallet. So we never have ownership of their keys. They own the Bitcoin, they own the keys. So the first issue was definitely data, getting access to data in a way that people could use it and be able to use our platform and try to make it as light as possible. In many ways, apps aren't as useful as mobile websites. I tell people to focus on mobile websites as a client is easier than apps because, again, they can always open it up and have no problem with access to it. So it's very important to also make that clarification. Apps can be very data consuming, and the way on the continent people manage their data, it's almost like managing your gas when you're driving a car. People are very cognizant of it, unlike in Europe maybe or in the United States where we just use data. As it relates to the transactions, I think one of the things I learned, and this is having an understanding of the technology, the history, politics, the United States is probably the biggest reason Zimbabwe has hyperinflation. When the Zimbabweans got their land back from, they call them farmers, but if somebody invades and takes your land, I would call them invaders. When they got their land back from those invaders, the United States put sanctions on Zimbabwe, OFIC sanctions. So it made it difficult for them to trade and get access to trade. that made it very difficult for them to actually access the universal currency called the dollar. Now, when they started printing more of their money, of course, that caused the hyperinflation. They then went to a dollar economy in 2000. So 2000, in the year 2000, the sanctions started. Hyperinflation started right after that. In 2008, Mugabe's regime said, look, enough of this. We're just going to use the dollar. If they're going to block us, people are not going to be, banks aren't going to be able to use our funds to transact. We're going to just use the dollar. And that worked probably all the way up into around 2017. And then the United States started blocking corresponding banks from being able to do business with Zimbabwean banks. So there was a couple banks in Germany, Poland, that still were doing business using USD currency to transact with Zimbabwe. Now they did it, and again, this is another thing people don't realize. When the United States, one of the most powerful economies in the world, says you can't do business because of sanctions, it makes doing business with you at a premium. So even many of those former Rhodesians that no longer had so-called farms, what they would do is set up businesses in South Africa, buy the crops or whatever they were buying in Zimbabwe at a discount and resell it in the open market at a premium. And so they didn't even need to be farmers anymore because they literally had control of the marketplace. What we were trying to do, and still we see the vision is, if we no longer couple your transactions to the US dollar, that dirty dollar that probably has COVID on it and any type of a pandemic on it, we can create a system that makes it more difficult for the tyranny of the US dollar to control your economy. Now, what happens when you say things like that, these are still countries. African countries really don't have sovereignty. There's no African country that can tell the UK and France, United States to go jump or go fly a kite. They literally, even when you think about an African dictator, they're being dictated to by somebody in the United States. At the end of the day, you'll see them do all kinds of negative things to the people, but these African countries will never do anything bad to a European. It's against the rules. So in Zimbabwe, they were faced with that situation. We had a viable solution through Bitcoin because, I'm not saying I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, but we did the first remittance transaction from Nigeria to Zimbabwe using 2 Lightning nodes. We do think that Bitcoin is the secure layer and that we can build fast transactions that don't have to be totally verified until you close out the node in order us to do business. And we think instead of people trying to always come up with new tokens, and I'm not against tokens, but we could actually create value by having trusted Lightning nodes where people want to run through your node versus another place because you're dependable. And you can make now some additional funds from that by being trusted. So we think as it relates to, as on the continent of Africa, even as we talk about African immigrant communities and folks, even in America, as African Americans as a subset of the overall country, 43 million people there, we see that there's another way for people who thought they missed out on Bitcoin to help continue to grow our networks with a second level participation based on trust again. And again, when we say I love Black people, we're talking about protecting Black people. Trust is still a difficult part. So when we're talking about developing a fintech company, we see that identifying ways to communicate with people based on trust will allow us to unlock that 1.5 billion people and use the lessons learned in Zimbabwe, working with their financial institutions, working with the KYC, dealing with identity. There's so many levels to this space, but I think the biggest thing that we learned, get the community together. I think we just don't, in the blockchain space, we don't talk enough about community. We can outmaneuver the banks. No one loves their bank, but they've been there so long. So instead of us just always trying to be smart, I think we should try to connect with the people based on their issues, and we have a viable solution. We don't think there's a political solution to these problems, but we do think, let me say in America is a political season, but what I'm saying is I think technology is a more scalable solution. Often when I talk about this, there's a thing called ride shares, Ubers or Lyft that I'm sure everyone has used. In America, one of the most racist times for a Black person, just 10 years ago was trying to hail a cab. They would literally pass black people by. Now, look, people thought you had to protest that. People thought you had to get Jesse Jackson to change the laws. But when they came out with rideshare, they didn't do this on purpose, so there's still problems. But literally, ride shares made that form of oppression or racism obsolete. Because now I have Lyft or Uber. I don't have to worry about being humiliated in the corner while they just drive by me. I literally pull up my cab. I know when they're coming, where they're going, and I'm treated like a human being. What we think, if we connect to people globally in that way, where they feel that they can trust us and that we want, they may even pay a premium. But more importantly, we're able to create a collective of people that now we can offer services that literally will change their lives. And they'll be the ones that we were looking for because we were the ones they were looking for. So I think some of this is about building community, not just talking about ecosystems. You know, if we go back to the origins of blockchain, Bitcoin, when it was the cypherpunks, and it was a community of people. And Bitcoin couldn't even work without people. Again, you know, we went from the CPUs to GPUs, but before there was all these, you know, super miners, there was just a community of folks who believed that technology could do something to liberate us. And I think sometimes we get lost in the get rich quick schemes. And this, even in the Black community, we even started a thing called the Black Blockchain Summit to get Black people, you know, the information, education. But the first thing we saw was these MMMs and the OneCoins. Like, everybody flocked to all the scams. We're like, look, we're talking about liberation. You're talking about getting pimped again. Look, we don't need no pimps and hoes. Look, stop. This is about sovereignty. This is about you, like, taking control, not following the leader. No, free yourself. So it was one of those things where it's been a long journey, and I think we have a lot of turns and twists, but I think fundamentally what Satoshi has come up is a starting place. You know, and I'm glad whoever, we say Satoshi is Black, but I'm glad whoever, or they are, or he was, or she was, that they left. Instead of being here to lord over us, this concept has made all of us be a part of Bitcoin in a way that one person trying to own it or covet it or have to do the PR for it, it doesn't exist. So again, yeah, thank you. And Simon, let me say this one more time. Thank you, bro, for believing in us, or else we wouldn't have the oxygen, the gas, the petrol to be here. So shout out to Bank to the Future. Whatever I need to do more. I know whatever I haven't done, I apologize on your show.
Okay. Thanks for that, Sinclair. So, all right. Well, look, the frontal issue, obviously, beside the pandemic, the side effect of this pandemic is it brought the Black Lives Matter to the front of everything. So tell us, if people are involved in these movements, why should they, what can you do with Billmari? What is it? What's the proposition? And how are you working to move this the movement forward at the moment?
Well, I think the first thing is no one's going to come save us. And I think that's why Satoshi was so amazing. He wasn't waiting for the government or NGOs or somebody come from the spook cloud to come down and tell us how, actually, we think technology is a scalable way to solve these problems. And with the foundation of what we've been building with Billmari, we are now, and this is a very unique time in history, that 1.5 billion people can now not only be connected just with the power of their phone, we have now a way that we can exchange value anywhere in the world. So what we are literally building is a way in 8 verticals. So there was a thing called the Green Book in America, and this was like a guidebook during American apartheid. Literally all the way up into the 60s, there were cities in America they called sundown towns, where if you were Black, you could be arrested legally, like legally arrested. Or if you were in an interracial marriage, that was unlawful. So we're not, and this is not 100 years ago. This is literally like within a lifetime of people here. But they had a guidebook that was started by entrepreneurs that were, no matter where you were in America, you could find places that you could go eat, places to sleep. What we've done is taken that concept and made it global and said, look, And this is how we talk about a two-sided marketplace that we can build using blockchain technology, because you need two sides. We have now said there are Black-friendly businesses. There are people who are already treating human beings like human beings. That's why when people say all lives matter, like, if they really all matter, that means everybody, including Black folks. There are already people who feel that way. We've included them on our directory. Our guide has Black-friendly. So if you're in Copenhagen, Denmark, and you get sick, it's going to be difficult to Google non-racist doctor. But there might be a Mongolian woman doctor that all the Black folks go to because she treats them so well. With our platform, you now have access to that information. And I say that meaning that when you're spending your money and your life is at risk, you want to go places where people respect and treat you well. So this is not in somehow trying to say this is something just for Black people. That would be silly. I mean, first of all, it's not enough Black business for that to be a reasonable market, but literally there are already people with goodwill, but it's hard to identify that. So just like this guy, George Floyd, who was murdered by the police in the United States, which is the state, the government. The state is probably the most violent entity in the world. So the state kills him, but he was literally accused of having a counterfeit $20 bill. Now, if he had Bitcoin and he went to a Bitcoin facility, I'm not going to bring that. But my point is, I've been in establishments and been totally drunk. They didn't call the police on me. They called the Uber and let me go home. What I'm saying is racism and these things really become ugly, not when things are going cool. It's when there's a problem and they can escalate and get real weird real quick with xenophobia or what have you. But if you have a guide where you got a place where you can go, where you spend your money and something goes wrong, you're in a place where they value your business or want you to be there in the first place. That's like peace of mind. And what we see that as, and we didn't know this at first, but literally people, when we started, wanted to join and become members of I Love Black People. Let me say it one more time. When we created this platform where we could have a two-sided marketplace with these trusted businesses and the customers wanted, people wanted to join. Now, I was upset with my marketing team. I was like, look, then we realized, wait a minute, that's an awesome thing. Like when we were just Billmari talking about remittances, nobody wanted to become a member of a remittance company. You know what I'm saying? But when we said I love Black people, people were like, yo, sign me up. I want to be a part of it. So we were like, hey, maybe that's a subscription. So we literally had these amazing people throughout the world joining us. So now we're about 43,000 members. And what we tell people, to be a part of the platform, Black people to be safe. That would be the antithesis of what we're about. Our model is, once we aggregate all these amazing people and amazing trusting businesses, we're not trying to come up with a Yelp model where we make the businesses pay. The only way the businesses can get on there currently is if they are recommended, it's crowdsourced. But our money play is what we've always done. It's actually the monetization of the transactions. We think ultimately, and I can say this in this community because you understand, we think we can create lightning networks of trusted businesses with these folks on the side. On our app, we still have our wallet and we'll always have a wallet. We think going forward, you're not going to be able to operate as a so-called app without having a component that can exchange value. So we still have our component that allows a member to access value to transact with. So we're now talking about that 1.5 billion people having a trusted environment that they can now do transactions on and ultimately do those transactions utilizing blockchain technology, either through digital coupons, either through rewards points, or just the actual transactions themselves and or remittances, because we're talking about a global network. That alone, we think is a monetization that becomes amazing. And then you add on to it that we also have now just started a subscription product where people can actually pay an annual subscription to be a part of I Love Black People. Now we've targeted that more toward the African-American community. It's $37, so that literally there are people interested in paying to help be a part of something. So when you start talking about like a cause like Black Lives Matter, that's not really a movement, but we're literally a startup that is connecting to a movement. And, we say market spaces, but we really think we're almost creating something like a movement space, where when people come here to convene on this commons, they're coming because they're interested, not just because they're Black through an affinity, but they are concerned about protecting Black people. And that could be anybody. So when we can convene those folks, we think those people for that space would be even willing to pay a premium just so they don't have to deal with the crazy behavior of folks who are racist or don't want them in their community. So we think the response to the Black Lives Matter is not to try to force people into behavior. What we think is we could be a clean glass of water. People are going to be thirsty. They're going to drink. But if you give them the option to go someplace where they're going to be treated super amazing, or a place where somebody's just tolerating their presence, we think they'll go for the clean glass of water. And we think that's something that's global. And then the connecting of that is through a technology that it has almost zero marginal cost to actually scale. And that's the thing that hasn't been here before. Before, you could just talk about a chat group of folks who are concerned about saving the whales or saving the environment. We literally can now create communities that can transfer value and use that whole cause-oriented, and again, in our space, we're talking about I Love Black People, but the model that we are using could be applied to any kind of group that wants to be together and now make transactions. And the fact that they're together because they believe in something, we think that's the stickiness. It's not how much things cost, because again, what we saw in Zimbabwe, Western Union and these other companies lowered their prices. When we came in, they were charging like 12% for the fees. And again, thanks Bank to the Future for helping us do this for the Zimbabwean people. Without y'all, it wouldn't have been possible. We literally came in and said, we're gonna make our fee 5%. Next thing you know, we saw World Remit come in the market at 5%. We dropped ours to 4%. And then we lost Mugabe. But my point to you is that overall, it's not enough to be a price leader. Being able to create an environment and experience that is something that people covet, we think that is the most scalable way to actually build something of value and be able to monetize. And people it won't be like rent extraction. People would rather be there. We're adding value. Ultimately, when we go to something like Lightning, again, we're not trying to make initially all our money off this one way. We think the community is actually the secret sauce. And to actually be able to develop that with blockchain has been amazing.
Okay, great. I'm going to invite Famida in case there's any questions from the audience. I've got more questions, but if there's questions building up. Famida, do you want me to carry on, or have you got some?
No, I do have some questions. This has been very awesome. Yeah, I had no idea the route, the path that Bitmari or Billmari is going through. So this is really, really awesome, especially now. I think it's more important than ever before. So yeah, it's awesome. Well done to you guys.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that often, Famida, she's doing a lot of stuff in the investor relations. But, things are so transactional sometimes at Bank to the Future. You've got a community of investors that are all looking to invest in this technology. But one of the things we try to do with BF Live is, take it out of that and bring it back to actually, this is just a bunch of people all trying to make a difference in the world. And so it's sometimes you don't actually get to see what's behind it. So that was one of the reasons why we wanted to get you on. Yeah,
but your thing, and I'm not trying to take away from the folks like me. You have people who really have been inspired. Me is one of them. And giving us an opportunity to be a part of the community. I see the Telegram. You know how the space has gotten, especially when we were talking about block size. Like this thing got real funny, and then we had the gold and Roger Ver with his, and again, and I'm not a hater. I'm a grown man. I'm not a hater. I put my pants on just like everybody else. But I don't have to demean someone else to elevate myself. And I just think the more you give us a chance to let you know how you've touched our lives, and that's what's hard when you're so driven and so ambitious like you are. You get like this because it's just hard enough to do it. So you just but there's people that are here that are thankful for you and trying to create community. I'm not saying create community to be cute. Even this thing about diversity, I tell people I don't do diversity to be cute. I think if you're going to just pick from old white men, I'll see you in the marketplace because I'm gonna have the best people. I'm gonna have amazing folks. And you got them same tired old white guys, and we're gonna whoop you because we're just gonna be better because we had a bigger pool to choose from, and you had all kind of like essential cases of why you picked someone. Well, his mama's name and his dad. I don't care who. None of that. Are you amazing? Are you relentless? Well, come on, let's go get these guys. So my point is, I think you speaking to how you actually said, I was a part of this system and I had to let it go, that inspires people. And especially during this pandemic, son, there are people who are afraid to do what you've done already that could be inspired, but they just don't hear your story because you think, okay, I'm not putting on, you think your story is an investment story. But this time, there's no investors are dickheads. I mean, I'm not saying, unless we're just talking hedge funds, where we're just talking about make as much money you possibly can, fuck everybody, forget everybody. Okay, that's a hedge fund. That makes sense. But when you're actually talking about solving problems, trying to make this a better world, bro, there's like a lot of people. And they want to hear your story. And this could be a Black woman in Uganda or a Black woman in Chicago. Her hearing how you said, I'm going to leave here and go someplace else translates across everything. But if you just make it a story about these damn investors, they're going to be haters. They're going to be pocket watching how much money you got. They're going to be doing all the things that crowd does. And that's why we had to, in a way, again, I'm an engineer by profession. We still are using technology, but I'm 51 now. And I want to spend the next 10 years working with people who are happy to see me, not people who are tolerating me or like, and that's, I don't care where they're from. You didn't do all this to work with a bunch of folks you don't want to work with. I mean, I tell people, even talk about leaving the plantation. We have this conversation with Black folks like, man, and we call them the plantation, meaning working for the man or working on the job. Don't leave the plantation and create another one. Like, that's why you left. Don't create a space. I mean, that's why I'm in the Dominican Republic. My wife is from the Dominican Republic. So my wife is not even from the United States. That's a little different. So my point is, find what makes you happy. And I'm just trying to share it. Like, share it in all the things that you're doing. And I'm saying, you're going to realize the energy that you get back from that. One more time. Even when I saw some of your earlier posts, and like, you've taken risks. That's just how it is. When you take risks, everything ain't going to work. And there's always going to be a hater. They're your biggest fans because they're the ones watching you more than anybody. The haters, those guys. But my point is, I think also share your story with people who want to hear it and be a part of it. And that's all. Only thing I'm saying is that's something I think we miss, not just with the work we do, but as individuals, captains of industry or founders, we're not doing enough to allow other people who can be inspired by our story, even if they're not in our particular field, to be inspired by us. And that's why politicians trick us. They're the ones in front of everybody all the time. And they're the biggest liars, no good bastards. But people who are literally putting their boots on and doing the hard work every day, we're so consumed by the hard work every day, we don't get the chance to shine. Anyway, I digress.
All right.
And that's the death trap of capitalism. and that's why I just thought, I've always thought, and when I was speaking to Simon, I've always understood that Bitcoin was this revolutionary thing and it's going to take us to another level and we don't have to be dependent on the government and XYZ. But then you just get trapped in that same vicious cycle because there are people that are still just about making the money, capitalizing and just monetizing off people that.
Brian Armstrong recently just came out with Coinbase. And one of my former employees went to school with Brian Armstrong. They were in the same, and Brian Armstrong used to be a model. So my former employees, this Black guy, they were real good friends in Houston, Texas. And you can see, and I met Brian Armstrong at Coinbase back in 2013. They had like an office, it looked like a condo. And this guy named Adam White worked with him. Adam's a super cool guy. And it was a nondescript office. It looked like a condo loft. This is before Coinbase blew up. This is before their Series A. And they let us in, talked to him. I got introduced, I told you, to the friend of mine who actually had worked for me. And they started in a little space, and then this week they come out and start talking about what you can't say at their office. And I think Coinbase is wonderful. And Coinbase actually, Simon, you may not know this, they were the first company that helped us when we were working with the bank in Zimbabwe.
Oh, really? No, I didn't know that.
And I didn't bring it up back then because that was something that they were trying to get a lot of regulatory licenses in the United States. You know, New York was a big asshole, making it hard for everybody with all the banksters blocking. So what happened was we actually did like phone calls, like this is Skype at the time, but Skype calls with them, Coinbase, and us talking about how we could implement an exchange-like product for them with Bitmari on the front end, but actually working with Coinbase. But what ended up happening was that their general counsel, you know, dealing with the OFAC. Let me tell you how the United States government could be it was wicked. The bank that we were working with at the time, they had lifted the sanctions against the bank. No longer, they had the documentation. They were no longer under sanctions from the United States government. However, the Treasury Department's website wasn't updated. What he said, and it was like done on purpose. Like literally, for like a year and a half, the website. Like, so let me say, they had the document. They had no longer under the OFAC sanction. But if you, as a layperson, go type in the name of the bank, it was still on the website on purpose. Like, how do you do that? Like, you know, you don't have a chance. So with that being said, their general counsel said, look, you know, this would be too much of a issue for us. 16 million people, the risk of dealing with OFAC. And people don't realize how they call them targeted sanctions, but you have to screen everybody. Like if they're targeting, let's just say 1,000 people in the country, that means every time you do KYC, you got to make sure it's not one of those people that's on the OFAC list and all these other lists. So it wasn't worth that extra, you know, hassle for Coinbase. So, you know, we were able to, and we were to help Perkins Coie is our law firm, and they made it very clear to us. The key was not Coinbase, the key was the bank and the reserve license. So for us, we were still able to pivot and work around that. And we ended up being partners with Uphold, which is based, and they super amazing. Uphold has been, you know, super great to us. Shout out to Uphold and in our relationship with the Zimbabwean bank. But that was some of the things that, you know, I see Brian Armstrong making the points about, you know, how we should be focused on our business. I don't tell people how to run their business. I think that, again, talking about sovereignty, you know, Simon, you got to wake up every morning and face yourself in the mirror and everybody who works for you, you got to make payroll. I'm not the person to tell you what you should do with your business, but to take an issue you might be having internally and put out a blog talking about, you know, Black Lives Matter, what you're not going to do. I think that's disingenuous. If you have a local problem inside your company where you have employees that aren't doing what they should do, handle it like that. But as an industry, especially when you're an industry leader and you start talking about how there's a separation for the mission of your company and what's going on, Rome might be burning and you're going to act like Rome is not burning. Literally, we all have had to change. I mean, COVID is a real phenomenon. We can't say I'm so focused on my mission of my company that I don't realize I got to do all remote and my employees might get sick and die. I mean, I think there's a connection as being just responsible human beings in business that we can maximize profit and not predatorial. And if you want to be an asshole, I think it's my prerogative. It's my company. If you don't want to work for me, I think that's fair. But I should not project me being a jerk or me having a problem managing my company and say that this is a stance for libertarians to say we need to push back against the activist crowd. Again, I don't let my employees just up and stage a protest in the company. You're working for me. Get to work. But my point is, I don't change that into another conversation about my global views of these particular issues. And I think some of that got conflated this week when, again, we of all industries are dealing with government oppression, not allowing us access to economies because these banks have literally bought the politicians. So if you see a movement and they're talking about how the state, which is probably the most violent group of people ever created, you see them hurting people, and you're like, oh, that's not my problem. But then you got to lobby somebody on Capitol Hill just so that you can have Coinbase exist.
All right, I'm going to go to questions.
Yeah.
So a question from John H. Any new funding round for BF and Billmari?
Now, I would love it, but I ain't gonna put Simon on the spot. But I tell you what, let me say, we were able to get some funding, and again, the funding has some stipulations on it, but we would definitely love some additional funding. What has happened because of this issue around what you brought up, Simon? How do we deal with this issue of racial justice? We're a startup, but we think our solution provides a way where through an API that you have any employees or you have customers, they can use our API no matter where they are in the world to find safe places. We think that's a value added. And we've now put together the data. We have over 27,000 businesses that have been recommended globally. And our focus has been on 236 major cities in the 8 categories. Our 8 categories are accommodations, food, transportation, education / childcare, healthcare, finances, beauty, and legal services. Those are like 8 critical areas of people activity that when you're in a foreign place or you're in a difficult situation, you need good information. We think that we're able to, even with a data play, we think we're even able to create something of value that large companies would be interested in supporting. So we're right now in the process of taking our website app and come up with an API that could be like a little widget that somebody like Expedia would have on their website. So if someone's traveling and they get sick, they can go to the Green Book API and type in their information and find a place where they can go and be treated with dignity and respect. And we think people will pay a premium. We think, again, that, as, Black and brown, as more people get more access to capital, more access to education opportunities, they're going to want to be treated well. And we don't have to bash or say negative things about those who don't want to do that, but we can elevate Bank to the Future for taking a risk on 2 Black founders and saying, hey, we think just on the merit, you guys are awesome. And that's what it's not. It's the fact that you guys opened your interest to allowing us to be funded and had us go through a process like you would have anyone else go to, and know that startups, 1 out of 10, only 1 out of 10 are going to make it. Give us that opportunity to fail. Like, we're going to bust our behind. Like, we're super resourceful and relentless. We've been around since 2015 and we still opening our door and we still make payroll. We're not going anywhere. And all we needed was an opportunity. So in many ways, we think a lot of this stuff is about the opportunity. And we think that when you do that, we're able to actually make it so that everybody can rise. And that's what's going to make the world a better place. It's not just talking about race. It's about giving everybody a reasonable access to an opportunity and then let them perform or not.
Simon?
Yeah, well, I'll leave it up to you. It's, we're community driven. Our investor community drives our decisions. So if our investors would like to see Bitmari up for another round, then you got to let us know. We'll put this video in the investor zone for existing investors. The interesting thing about all these is you can start, and the Coinbase story that you talked about, I will let you have more questions, Anita, but there was a few things I'd like to respond to. The institutions, organizations, as you succeed, often laws and just regulations can actually suck the soul out of what you originally intended to do. So we're talking about Coinbase. You're talking about these, just a small example, PEP sanctions. I will go to prison if I don't follow those laws. Literally, I have a legal obligation to follow those requirements. And me personally as an individual will go to prison if I don't follow those. And yet, when you go deep, and I always do, whenever I try and, when first discovered Bitcoin, went deep. But when we started looking at all these PEP and sanctions, and you start to realize that, you as a financial services provider, providing services and corridors, you have to do all these screens, and it's a legal requirement as part of your registration. But I started actually going really deep into how these lists are actually put together. And when you start to look, you have organizations that have political agendas that they might come from a black hate community or whatever it might be, they can literally put up a blog post around a particular company or a particular individual. And the Google algorithm will pick up those articles, and those will make it through their artificial intelligence or whatever it is into these PEP and sanction databases. So you literally have organizations that have hate agendas against a certain demographic of society, creating content that algorithms is picking up, and that comes through into these searches as a negative news scrub. And then when financial institutions are making, they have to, by law, or they go to prison, sanction screen and PEPs and do all these different scrubs. They're literally, some of that data can come from a completely, politically motivated agenda that ends up on that list. And this can ruin people's lives. And I watched a documentary of people that got included on these lists through complete political agenda, and the impact it has on their life in general. They can't get bank accounts. They can't get access to financial services. They had to spend like 2 to 3 years trying to get off these lists. And it was just driven by some radical, movement. And so these laws are being introduced that financial institutions have to follow that require us to do these almost political agenda screenings. And it's really, a hard fact and reality of when you get into these financial institutions and what we have to actually do. So, we could want to be as inclusive as we want, but then we've got all these laws that you've got to go through. So anyway, slight tangent, but have we got any questions from you? More questions from the audience, Ramita?
Yeah, I think it's pronounced Ike or Ike. So what can I do as an Afro-European to help or participate in this project, or basically how can they participate?
Oh, awesome question. Again, become one of Simon's investors and make sure you get on down and let them know Billmari should have another round. After you do that, or before, you can actually join us. You go to iloveblackpeople.com. You can become a member of I Love Black People. You become an ambassador. And again, when you become an ambassador, we ultimately see this platform not just providing a marketplace of just safe places. When we literally have ambassadors, we can almost create like a travel agent Uber effect, where you're an ambassador and able to help give people advice on where they should go to get treated and receive the services that they need, and literally have those services in a place called I Love Black People on our platform, which is again owned by Bitmari. That then becomes a part of your giving back. Everybody's not going to be out there protesting. Or my dad, I'm actually second generation technologist. My dad was a computer scientist when he had punch cards and Honeywell reels. He was in the military. He was in the Air Force. And my dad, during the Martin Luther King days, was in Southeast Asia. And so he didn't march. He was literally in a place doing probably things that he would never want to, and he's never really talked about because of his situation. But he still believed in freedom, even though he was being used as an instrument of something that was the total antithesis of it. I tell people, everybody's not going to be a protester. Everybody's not going to be the one waving that. But if you can recommend a business that's Black friendly, wherever you are in Europe, there's, one of the things that's probably not self-evident. A lot of times, a lot of African immigrants, or immigrants in general, no one ever asked them, what's your favorite restaurant? We had a brother, I think he was from Cameroon, he was in Italy. And we literally asked him, what's your favorite restaurant? And most of the time, the way xenophobia and all this stuff works, it makes people invisible. Just the fact that we asked him what his favorite restaurant was, he was like, he was so excited, to share his experience with his favorite restaurant. And I'm saying there are so many things, again, it doesn't have to be like some monumental thing, but just us connecting with people all over the world and say, what is your favorite place where they treat you with dignity and respect? We're going to take that information and share it with our whole network. And it's that simple. That is how, and again, that's why, Simon, it's not trying to get people to do things that are weird, just to add a few Black friends. Literally, just in your course of doing business, you doing what you did, I became aware of your work, not because of race, gender, or whatever. It was because we had a common ideology, a common interest. That common interest can lead to friendships. I mean, it's not, that's what I'm trying. People try to make this, and it's the state. The state benefits from creating this disparity. People try to make it, anyway. My point is, we have a real way that people get involved. They can just come on, become a member. They can recommend safe places throughout the world. Please, you can go to info@iloveblackpeople. Send me an email at info@iloveblackpeople. Say, hey, I listened to Simon, love it. And definitely, it's about creating community, and we appreciate it. I'll make the answer short. I'm sorry, Simon.
All right. Well, we've got literally 2 minutes left. So you still Bitcoin focused in terms of the actual transactions and Lightning nodes and things? What are you guys doing now?
I'm gonna give you my story, and I can tell it. I got hacked back in 2018, and I was, again, this is a little, I should, our wallet product, there's no way because I had my private keys, it's very difficult to hack. I was using an exchange to do some transactions, and I left some Bitcoin, about 50 Bitcoins on the exchange. And they did a SIM swap hack. Somebody, while I was in Zimbabwe, literally took my SIM and then said they were me. I had my thing set up with 2-factor authentications, and they were able to, get the. They didn't have to know the password. They just had it sent to my phone, and then they were able to get into my account. They literally, it's been one of those things where literally that lesson, that I had already learned many times about, if you don't have the private keys, those are not your Bitcoin. But also, I think we as a community have to do more, because we do believe in self-sovereignty and responsibility. But if somebody steals, you're a no good bastard. We got to stop, I think, as a community, when somebody hacks, there's nothing cool about you robbing me. And if I see you in the street, I'd probably punch. What I do is probably problematic. But my point is, these are some of the things I think as a community, we have to say that as we bring more people here, we, not the government, but we as folks with goodwill need to hold each other. Because the person who did it was somebody who was tech savvy. This wasn't, somebody on the street corner. This was somebody, in their dark room, in their underwear probably, doing these bad things. With that being said, I'm still super bullish. This space, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, but that's why I hold. I hold Bitcoin. That's my thing. I think, again, Lightning, I think we shouldn't be lazy and just think Satoshi was going to do everything. That's ridiculous. We need to continue to make this a vibrant and this decentralized finance thing. There's some real interesting things out there. I'm not a stable coin guy. I think, I think Bitcoin is great for the digital world. I think when you try to connect the digital to the physical, and you got to have an oracle and somebody to trust. I don't trust. Anyway, my point is, but I still think there's a space for all of these. And I think it's a good way to on-ramp and for people to move around. I think community coins, I think fundamentally the value that the world really possesses is in each and every one of us. This currency is just a currency. It's just something that allows us to flow, and whatever instrument we use for that, I think the real value is in each one of us. So I think definitely this is awesome. Again, Simon, I pitched so many people and you said yes. Like, we're still breathing. Black folks over here still breathing, Simon, because of you, man. Thank you, bro. Thank you forever. If you ever need some Black Lives Matter, Simon, let me holler at him. I'm going to say that Simon been good to us.
Okay, well, there's a lot more people behind me in the team. So, we make it all happen, Famida included, and everyone else in the team. And Amon that reached out to you to bring you onto this. So, yeah, there's a whole team of us behind this. And it's great to remember that. So I think we could carry on talking for ages. I think, the moral of the story here is that Bitcoin started as this small thing, and it brought around all these different communities and all these different movements, and really just shared around a common goal and common vision of what impact this can have on society. Many people have different views of what it should be, but we're having this conversation simply because of Bitcoin. So, that I'm eternally grateful for it for, as well as the financial freedom that it can give people, and the impact that has on freedom of speech when you can actually have freedom to transact. So that's going to do it for episode 72 of Bank to the Future Live. Please do like and share this video. Please do say in the comments if you'd like to see more of this, and let us know what you'd like to see in future episodes. Famida, thank you for getting some of the questions and moderating there. And Sinclair, thank you for being yourself, and just keep doing what you're doing. And we'll see how we can support you along that journey as it grows. Okay, bye everybody. That's it, we're done, I think.